everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today I'm going to be going over a topic that is feared amongst all pregnant women no matter what. It's something that we worry about from the moment we're pregnant to the moment we deliver the baby. And that is a miscarriage. And a miscarriage is something that is on a pregnant woman's mind most of the pregnancy, usually. And I mean, you know what I'm talking about, ladies. You will run to the bathroom to check for blood at all hours of the day. Usually in first trimester is when our fear is at its highest. There are basically 4 types of non-traumatic bleeding that can occur in pregnancy. And I've decided to do this topic because when I was pregnant, it was something I was very worried about. Let's get started about talking about the 4 main reasons for non-traumatic bleeding in pregnancy. We'll start with number 1, which is ectopic pregnancy. And ectopic pregnancy is when fertilization occurs in the fallopian tube. And this is basically the first diagnosis that often physicians will go with. It's also the most life-threatening for the mother in the sense of it can become dangerous very quickly if it's not caught early. The diagnosis is done through labs as well as imaging meaning ultrasound. So in a lab result of a blood panel, you might see the HCG rising very, very slowly. And with regards to imaging, ectopic pregnancy, you will see that it's fetus as well as the gestational sac and everything in the fallopian tube, and the uterus will show as empty. So number 2 is a miscarriage. So once ectopic pregnancy has been ruled out, meaning they see a fetus and a gestational sac in the uterus, they will go to miscarriage. And miscarriage, there are 4 different types, and I'm actually going to do a video after this on the 4 different types of miscarriage so you are educated and understand that as well. But it would just make this video too long if I did it in this video as well. But a miscarriage tends to be heavier bleeding and greater amount of cramping and not very much spotting. So not so much spotting as it is heavier bleeding and cramping. But again, I'm going to do an entire video on the different types of miscarriages so that is well understood amongst you ladies. Number 3 is the one that we want it to be as moms. We are dying for it to be number 3, and that is implantation bleeding. And basically diagnosed that it's implantation bleeding is that the HCG is rising well. The ultrasound indicates there's a fetus in the urine with fetal cardiac activity, meaning there's a good heartbeat. So that would indicate possibly it is implantation bleeding, the thing that we pray for when we see bleeding, the thing that we hope for when we see bleeding. In fact, my first pregnancy, I had spotting and gushes of blood for 5 weeks, and I prayed it was implantation bleeding. I prayed every single day. I hoped it was. And fortunately it was, but it was extremely scary. And that tends to be spotting, not heavy bleeding like a period, usually not immense amounts of cramps where you're just kind of toppled over like that or in a fetus position. So it's mild amount of spotting and mild amount of cramping. The spotting and implantation bleeding tends to happen about 10 to 14 days after fertilization. So that's why a lot of women confuse implantation bleeding for their periods, because it happens exactly roughly around the time you'd miss your period or when you'd get your period. So that can be confusing. That's why often women are wondering, is this implantation bleeding or is this my period? So that can be conflicting with women as well, because it lands exactly plus or minus a few days when you get your actual period. The 4th non-traumatic bleeding that can happen to women while pregnant is cervical vaginal uterine pathology. And that is something like infection, inflammation, polyps. So that could be the 4th reason you might be having the bleeding. Another one could be like cervical cancer. So that is number 4 for the reasons of possible non-traumatic physical bleeding in pregnant women. So UpToDate.com had some studies about bleeding. I found one of them really interesting. So they did a study on 550 pregnant women, of which 117 of them had a bleed prior to 20 weeks. and 67 of those women out of the 550 and out of the 117 that bled had miscarried. So again, 550 women, 117 had bleeding, and 67 of those women miscarried. So those are the numbers on one of the bigger studies that UpToDate.com had on their database. And I know this is a very, very stressful time, and seeing blood when you're pregnant, your heart just stops. It goes into your stomach. You feel sick to your stomach. You feel like throwing up. Your head is spinning. It is just the scariest thing that could ever happen to you because you've already fallen in love with your baby. I hope that outlines 4 possible reasons why you may be bleeding and pregnant. Have a good night, ladies and gentlemen.